Today, reinterpreting a classic image I love with Lightroom Classic's latest masking capabilities. We're gonna look at a portrait that I captured on a workshop in Michoacan 6 years ago, and I'll take you along on a little fun Day of the Dead photo adventure at the same time. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. This week, I'm gonna do a start to finish edit. We're gonna take this portrait image that just happened with an amazing Day of the Dead celebrant in Pátzcuaro, Mexico back in 2018, the last time I ran a workshop for Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, and show how we can change it to this with the power of Lightroom Classic's masking. Really easy and intuitive to just go in and fine tune almost any kind of image, but portrait images, I've just been kind of blown away with what they make possible. Quickly before we do that, I want to throw out a couple notes. One is a correction. I misspoke in my Z6 III sort of, initial pros and cons video about its Nikon fixing the user 1, user 2, user 3 exposure setting frustrations that lots of us have had with the cameras that have those user modes on the dial. I had quickly played around with it, set up some settings in the user modes, changed my exposure settings, turned the camera off, turned it back on, and saw that my exposure settings stuck. Sadly, as a number of you in the YouTube community have pointed out, if you turn the camera off for more than 10 seconds, those user settings revert to the settings you originally programmed when you saved the user settings. And for those of you that don't understand the ramifications of that, you're out, you've programmed an action mode, you figure, yeah, my general starting point is 1250th of a second, but then you're photographing slower moving creatures in darker conditions, and you find that you can get down to a 60th of a second, still get a nice sharp shot, and you're waiting for that perfect moment. You turn off the camera to save battery, and when you flip it back on, you're back at 1250th of a second. It doesn't remember what you've been changing during the shoot in that user mode with regard to exposure settings. And I really wish Nikon would fix that. I thought that they had, but I spoke prematurely. I didn't turn it off long enough and turn it back on. And I'm finding that myself, that it's a little frustrating. So there's my little correction for the week. I misspoke. All right, so one of the things that I have been really enjoying, I've been running through my massive Lightroom catalog from the 90s to today, and I'm really culling down and picking a new portfolio. And Rick and I have been working on a fun training course for those of you who want to better organize your images, and we're just about done with that. And in the process of that all, I've been re-envisioning some of my older images and some of the things that I've edited long ago using all the new tools that we have at our disposal. And I just think it's really exciting to go back and work on some of your favorite images from yesteryear with, the development that's gone on with you as a photographer and as an editor in the interim, and also with the software that we have. So without much further ado, I'm going to take you on a quick little tour of this workshop that we ran in Michoacan back in 2018. One of my favorite workshops, and I wish we could go there again. I'll give a little talk about what's going on in Michoacan that precludes that at the end for those that are interested. But let's jump in and look at some images. All right, so I'm here in Lightroom Classic, and let's just make this nice and big. This is this woman that we just encountered on the street on the actual Noche de Muertos, the Night of the Dead, the big celebration. And she was all geared up to be in the old city for the celebration, and was just a spectacular model. It's just someone we encountered on the street, and she let the workshop photograph her. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about an adventure like this, is that when people are all dolled up for a big event, be it a wedding, be it an event like Dia de Muertos, they're excited to be photographed after they're all fixed up. And this gal is just a natural model. I didn't get her name, but spectacular model. And so here's the image as captured straight out of the camera. I was shooting with a Nikon D850 back in those days, and my 105 1.4 portrait. I think I was shooting with my 105 1.4 for this. But I was at 2.8 to try to get a little more depth of field for both eyes. There's still only one eye perfectly in focus, but it's enough apparent focus to get both eyes looking a little sharper than it would at f1.4. And here's the edit, and I'm going to show you how you can quickly and easily take a raw photo without any Photoshop or any processing to this level, and then we'll dive into Photoshop and clean up a little bit of the bloodshot veins in her eyes too. She may have been celebrating a little during the Day of the Dead. So really quickly, I'll just run you through how spectacular this location is and how I dream of, again, being able to take photographers in to photograph this. I have these family connections to the town of Uruapan in Mexico and to this particular beautiful old hacienda of a hotel, which is right on the edge of the Rio Cupatizio National Park, this park that flows through jungle-covered waterfalls and trails that lead down to an old fabrica that's owned by the family of my grandfather's best friend, who was in military intelligence in World War II and settled down in Michoacan and turned this old fabrica into a working production house for fair trade woolen goods. It's just an amazing place. And we were able to use a room in there for our workshop. And we ate traditional food and just lived it up and went on horseback to an old town that had been completely buried by a volcano that started in a farmer's field, and all that was left are the ruins of the old cathedral. You can see the altar here with Sandy down in it, and the horseback trip into that was just amazing. But the show is really about the celebration for the Dia de Muertos. It's a multi-day celebration. The epicenter of it is in Pátzcuaro, which is down on a beautiful lake on Lake Pátzcuaro in Michoacan, and there are graveyards on all these little islands, and you take boats, and it's a flower-filled celebration that all the citizens of Michoacan just get into. And marigolds are sort of the big event there. So we were out photographing people getting ready for the event. There's marigolds everywhere. People are getting into the festive spirit, walking the streets, and everyone's excited to be photographed in their Dia de Muertos, garb and makeup, and it's just so much fun to go there and photograph people. And Dia de Muertos is a little different than our Halloween. It's actually a celebration of ancestors. People put photographs of their ancestors' favorite food and things, and build these ofrendas, these altars, and they come and remember and tell stories and think about their lost parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles. It's a really special, really kind of wholesome, it's a night to commune with the dead, the departed, the family that we've lost. And it's actually really special. And when it comes to the night, the Noche de Muertos, the Night of the Dead, it's all these families sitting out by their ancestors' graves with them decorated with candles. And it's this combination of dress up and deep remembrance that's actually quite beautiful. And while we were in Pátzcuaro, the day of the Noche de Muertos, we encountered people that were just amazingly made up, including this couple. And there's the woman that was such an amazing portrait subject. And so we'll come back to that in just a few more images. I'll start editing the image of her and just show you the power of masking in Lightroom Classic. But I'll show you a few more pictures from that night because it was just so much fun. People are out parading in the streets by candlelight. There's music. You can just feel the intensity. Young people, old people, everyone is out there. And as I said, the graveyards are the epicenter of it. People are really just, remembering their family members, sitting with memories and telling stories. And it's a night of celebration. It's not really a scary sort of a holiday like Halloween in the States. It's a much more, introspective, quiet kind of a holiday. And it was beautiful. And we'll talk a little bit about why I can't take workshops back there, but I long to in the not so distant future, and I hope we can again. So, okay, we're back at this image, and we're here, I'll open up my my top tab here so you can see some navigation. We're in the library module. Anytime you click on these, you can pull in the panels left and right. I'm just giving the image more screen space here by keeping them shut down. I'm going to jump into the develop panel here. We don't need this left panel, that's all just navigation, but we want our settings over here. And this is straight out of camera. You see nothing's really been changed. It was just nice light. It was a little bit overcast. Old city wall to blur behind her. Had that wonderful 105mm 1.4, which is such a spectacular portrait lens. It was just the right lens for the right moment with the right model. even though she's not really a model. She just is someone who looks perfect for the scene. So if you look at the histogram here, you know, the right side of the histogram is pure white, the left side of the histogram is the blacks in the scene. And if you hover over those little triangles, you can get a clipping mask. You see those little red highlights show up around her eyes. That means we've blown out to pure white there. Those are kind of specular highlights. Not a big deal, but something I like to work on in my raw processing globally here. I'm going to hold down my J key on the keyboard, which is going to kind of keep that clipping mask active. You can see the red there. And I'm going to go ahead and pull my white slider a little bit. I don't go too far with that because I find it can dramatically alter the image, but I really want to bring my highlights down. And I'll bring them down a fair bit and then maybe pull exposure back just a smidge. Look at that. Basically got rid of those highlights. A little bit of contrast in the scene too, which is not terrible for a portrait image. You know, we could try pulling highlights back just to, nope, it's fine. And I'll show a little trick at the end for making sure that when we print, we don't have pure white and no ink left on the paper where these little fringes of red are in the specular highlights. All right, I don't really want to boost contrast in the model's face. That's never a good look for portrait subjects. I think we've got pretty much a high contrast enough scene here. There's, you know, if I pull the black slider, you can see black is starting to show up as blue here in between the roses. You know, we might pull the shadows in the scene up just a little bit, thinking particularly around her eyes and that dark part of her makeup and in her hair, in the roses, just to bring the exposure up just a little bit. But I'm going to differentially edit her. We're going to use masking, like I talked about. I don't want to add any texture, clarity, certainly not dehaze here. I don't want to saturate anything. It looks beautiful as it is. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to, well, you know, actually, let's have a look at noise in this image. Just because this is something I might want to print big. It was shot with the D850 at 450 ISO, and I'll bet I could clean up noise just a little bit. I see a little bit of noise in these smooth, out of focus renderings. So I'm just going to show you how I would do that. I would hold down the Option key on the Mac, the Alt key on the PC, and I'm going to hold it down while I move all of these detail sliders because they give me a different view. If I do any sharpening, it'll give me a black and white view, which makes it easier to see what I'm doing. Same thing with luminance noise. I'm going to pull that, watching particularly out in here, I'm going to pull that luminance noise and I'm just going to kind of smooth it out. I'm going to potentially lose a little bit of sharpness, but not too much. I'm just blurring fine detail in the image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost my sharpness just a little bit to kind of offset that, but I'm going to do it only on details larger than the noise. So this masking slider is going to say I only want to sharpen details larger than this setting. And I can look at the noise that way. I might say, ooh, I want to get rid of a little bit more noise. You know, and as I go back to these older DSLR files, I do find that they render more noise. They've been really good about suppressing noise with the later sensors in the Z8, Z9, and some of the ways that they just come in processed. See, that looks great, all right? We still have plenty of sharpness here. We can pull it up just even a smidge more. Sometimes I like to bring detail, I don't mess with detail very much, but I bring the radius back a little bit. I want it to be subtle, the sharpening. I don't want to over sharpen, create any false edges. Looking at that, it looks great. All right, so we've gotten rid of a little bit of noise before we get going. I'd rather do that underlying my heavy editing. Not that I'm going to edit this too heavily. So I'm talking about masking. Let's jump in there. I'm going to hit this little circular icon, which is our masking section, and it opens up masking. And you could do some global settings that are sort of shortcuts, subject, sky, background, but you'll notice people is open here. If it's closed, just click that little triangle, and it sees her. And look at that, it sees her quite well. I'm going to go ahead and click on the person, and it starts detecting features. All right, right now I'm hovering over lips. Notice how it's got her lips? We might as well make a mask for her lips. And then her facial skin. Her facial skin is a little, the makeup has a little bit of texture to it. We could probably calm that down a little bit. We could create a mask for the entire person if we want. I don't think I need to do that. I don't think I need to do anything for her body skin. I grab her eyebrows. You might want to darken those a little bit. I don't know. The sclera, that's the whites of her eyes. I definitely want to mask for the whites of her eyes. The iris and pupil, I want to mask for that. All right. Hair, I think her hair looks phenomenal. I can't imagine improving it. Her clothes, Clothes look great. I can't imagine doing anything to those. So what we've got here is create 5 separate masks. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button. 5 masks are going to be created, and we can go in and work on each one. This one is her face, the facial skin, and I could click and name that if I wanted to. I don't feel the need, it's pretty obvious. And what I want to do is I want to reduce the texture of her skin a little bit. So I'm just going to pull that texture slider the opposite direction people are prone to pulling it. And look at that, smooth her face all the way. All right? And I might grab sharpness and just pull the sharpness of details on her skin back a little bit. I just want it to be smoother. Not too much. I don't want to go, you know, fashion magazine smooth. I could pull contrast back just a little bit, remove some of the shadows and highlights in it, just kind of smooth that face. And I think that, you know, if we turn that off and on, it's made a significant difference. It just looks nicer. All right, and we could, you know, you can also, once you've got that mask, you could fade in and out. You know, you can make it more or less just sort of an opacity slider on the work you just did. I might back off just a little bit, like 15%. Boom. All right, there we go. So now what's mask 2? Mask 2 is her eyebrows. You know, do we want to make them just a little bit darker? I don't know. Do we want to boost the contrast of them a little bit? I don't think I need to do much with her eyebrows, but I have it there if I change my mind later. The sclera, the whites of her eyes. I'd like to make that a little bit brighter, not too much, not to get fake, and that makes those little veins that are red in there pop out. And then I'd also like to just tune the saturation back. Let's make them a little more pure white so we get rid of some of that pink that's in there. Boom, done. That looks good. All right, I think the next one's going to be the iris and pupil. That one we're going to boost exposure a bit, just make her eyes pop. All right, and then we can boost saturation. This is one of the only spots I really want a little more saturation, is in those green eyes, like that. Wow, so cool. And then this one's her lips. Again, maybe just boost the saturation. They're a great color, but I think just make them pop just a little bit. That looks great. Now I want to add another mask, and I don't think that it's going to instantly capture these roses on her head, but I would like to just brighten and saturate those a little bit. So I'm going to choose I'm clicking on Create New Mask up here, and I'm clicking on Objects, and that gives me this little brush. And what I'm going to do is just kind of draw around. I don't have to paint every bit of them, but I just kind of want to roughly go around the edge. So I'm telling Lightroom that what I want is this crown of roses that she's got, all right? And I don't have to fill it in even. I'm just going to draw around the edge like this. Here we go, like so. Let go. Amazing. It missed a little tiny bit. I don't think it matters. I could go in and add. You know, you could come up here and click on it. You could add with a brush or with object detection and get that little edge. But I think for our purposes, I don't want to take all that time. What I want to do is I want to boost exposure a little bit, brighten those up, and then boost saturation just a little bit and make them pop. Bam. All right. I'm going to use another mask. And this one is going to be the background. Let's see if it'll select the background for me. And boom, perfect. It's got the wall and everything but her. So what I want to do there, you probably can guess, is I want to drop the exposure a little bit just to make her stand out more. Not a lot. I don't want it to look fake. Just a little bit, all right? And then, if I want, I could boost contrast a little bit, and I could drop saturation a little bit. I don't want the color in that wall competing with her in any way. Just not completely, but just a little bit, you know. There you go. Boom. And if I wanted to go one more step to just kind of get an old-fashioned portrait look, I could grab a radial gradient filter. What is that? That's an oval or a circle, depending on how you draw it. You can make it how big you want. I want it to sort of cover her face. And I can grab the center part of it and move it. I can adjust it with these control points. And then I want to invert it, because right now we would be only working on her face. I only want to work outside of her face. So I'm going to invert that mask. And you'll see it flip, all right? It's not going to affect her face. It's going to affect everything else. And I just want to subtly create a vignette. Really subtle, all right? Boom. And there you go. That looks great to me. Now, I said I would do one more thing kind of on the route to having a final printable copy of this. And I can always just click this tool to close, and we're back to all of our basic raw processing settings. What I would do here is I'm going to right click my image. I could go back into the grid view in the library if I want to. And I could go to the loop view in the library too. I'm going to go right click and I'm going to say edit in Photoshop 2024. And I just want to get, there's that one vein that kind of bugs me in her eye. And I'm in my dual monitor view mode right now. I'm going to switch that so you can all see what I'm doing. I'm going to go into a different workspace that I've saved. You can arrange all your panels and you can choose which ones are active here. But I've got my little single screen for video so that I'm not hiding the ball from any of you. And I want to copy the background, so I'm not working on the background layer. This is a layers menu. Photoshop is a layered workflow. Now we're, for the first time, actually changing pixels. We're not just raw processing. Everything we've done up to this point is just writing metadata instructions into the Lightroom catalog and the sidecar file on how to display this raw data from the camera. Now we're actually creating a new Photoshop document, and we're going to go in and mangle some pixels here. This is more permanent stuff that we're doing. So I want to work on another layer. I could click on my little action I have here I've created, copy layer to just click, but I'll show you how I created that action. It was by going to layer, new layer, boom, all right? And I can just call it layer 1, and I've got, oh, sorry, I just did the wrong thing. I want a layer from background. See, I'm so used to doing it from my, I want layer from background. We've got our background copy, all right? So now, we basically have the background layer and a copy. If I turn both of them off, we see nothing. Here's the background, here's the identical copy sitting on top of it. We're going to work on the copy. I'll show you why that's important in a second. And we're going to zoom in. I could grab my magnifying tool, or I can just use Command or Control on the PC, plus. And we can go in, we'll go to 300% on her eye. Let's fill the frame with this eye in particular, which has the offensive vein in it. All right, and again, we're on the background copy. That's the active copy. And I'm going to use this really cool tool here, the remove tool. You might not see that. You might see the spot healing brush. I think that's default. But any of these tools that have a little triangle at the bottom right, you can long click them and choose a different one. And I'm going to choose the remove tool. And I can size my tool with the left and right bracket keys. And I'm going to make it nice and small. And I'm just going to chase down this vein right here. You can see it's painting kind of a pink outline. This is the thing you want to remove. Yes, this is the thing I want to remove. And I'm just going to run along in here and sort of say, I want to remove that. And boop, look at that. Maybe I'll take this out too, this little section. We kind of got the most offensive part gone though. You know, you could go in here, you could spend all day, you could try to perfect her eye. I don't think it looks that bad. The other eye looks just fine. You know, maybe you go just a little bit broader brush stroke right through that section right there. I don't know. Yeah, that is a little bit better. Like that. Oop. All right, and I always do this kind of retouching on another layer. All right, and I'll show you why. We come back out. Let's go back to our 100% view. I'm hitting the Command minus on my keyboard twice. Takes me back to 100% view. And I can turn off that layer and see the original one. There's that vein coming back on us, right? But here's a cool thing to do, especially if you're taking lines off people's faces. She doesn't really have any lines. But if I hover over the opacity symbol here, I get a little scrubber with the finger and the two arrows there. And I'm just going to scroll to the left. And I'm just going to reduce the opacity of that background layer to where it's only showing 73% opacity of what I've just done, and a little bit of that underlying structure comes back through. I'm just taking a little bit of the night before out of her eyes, but not all of it. And that's a more natural look to that. All right, so now if I hit Command 0, that goes back to a fit view. Subtle, but great. And I can either save it with those layers, which would double the file size, or I could say, I'm really happy with what I just did. And I could click on my little action to flatten all the layers, or I could go to the layer menu and come down, flatten image. Now it's all one layer again. And if I hit save, which is Command S, or going to the file menu and saying save, you see how it shows you Command S, Control S for PC. It's going to save it. And then we could quit Photoshop. I'm hitting Apple Q or Command Q. And all of a sudden what we got here is two files. Let me turn on my information here. From 2018, shot November 1st, the Noche de Muertos. And we've got a PSD file. Everything's baked into this one with her eye fixed, and we've got the raw data with all those edits that we did completely re-editable. If we were to go into develop and have a look at our history, every time you ever open this, everything will be laid out with all that you've done. That simple, all right? You can come back through it, all right? You can create snapshots. Here's, let's create a new snapshot. I'll call it ATS edit, all right? Boom. This is a snapshot within Lightroom's develop module, and I have straight out of the camera and what we just did, boom. And then adding a little Photoshop to just clean up her eye a little bit. And then I promised you I'd show you a quick move I would do before I would print and create a print proof copy of this, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. It would be right here in develop, in the right panel, you've got tone curve. And I would make sure that I'm working on all three colors. This is red, this is the green channel, this is the blue channel. I want all three colors. All right, that's this one right here. And I will grab that little point up at the top, which says 255, 255. And that's saying that the image is at 255, 255, 255, red, green, and blue. That means pure white in the language of color. Color goes from 000 black to 255, 255, 255 white. I'm just gonna alter the curve to where it's 255 in equals 250 out, and now there is no more white. If I hover over her jewels on her face and hit the J key, there's no more specular highlights showing up. If I hover over that triangle, I have remapped those to a very, very, very bright white light gray. And what that means, if you're a printer, is that it will lay a bit of very, very light gray down there on that portion of the print instead of leaving plain paper that can have a gloss differential. Now, a lot of modern printers get rid of the need for that by laying kind of a gloss enhancer over the top of everything, but some printers still really look rough when you don't put some ink on some little section of the paper that has pure white in it. So there you go. I don't know. I'm just basically blown away by what we're capable of doing with our modern software, and the fact that if you've been shooting raw, which I really believe you should be shooting raw, you can go back and take that exact data that came off the sensor that night in 2018 and bring it into 2024's masking raw capabilities in Photoshop or in Lightroom and the remove tool in Photoshop, and just take it to a level that my editing powers and my software weren't capable of back in 2018 without all that much work. It's super cool. Not to mention Lightroom's classic masking capability and the way with which you can work with raw data. And again, we're not changing any of the raw data. We're just writing instructions on how to handle it. It doesn't get baked in until you create that PSD file, that full raw processing file to send in to Photoshop, or that smaller JPEG to share online with all those changes baked in. It's just cool stuff, really cool stuff. All right, so I promised I would really quickly mention, about Michoacan, and it's really sad. My family, my grandfather has a long history with the avocado industry in Southern California as well as in Michoacan, and part of the reason why we had friends, and we still have friends and family down in Michoacan and such a connection to that spectacular place was through all of that. But sadly, Michoacan's wonderful climate, the rain, the heat, the volcanic soil that makes it such a spectacular place for growing avocados also makes it a spectacular place for growing more illicit things. And the people running that industry have noticed how much money the avocado industry is generating down there. And there's been significant violence with them trying to take over the avocado trade to launder the drug money through and to make legitimate money. And so it's just become, since I did this workshop, I look every year and it's just not safe. And I talk to my family, friends, and it's not safe. So we'll just hope for a better future for the people of that region, because they're wonderful, and a time when we can go back and celebrate Dia de Muertos. And if you're more curious about that holiday, check out the animated film Coco. It's beautiful. It's a great film to watch with children or grandchildren, and it really tells the whole story and history of the Dia de Muertos and Noche de Muertos. It's epic, it's fun. So, and great music too. All right. So we're gearing up for Glacier National Park. That workshop is less than 2 weeks out. I can't wait. I'll do a video about what I'm taking on that workshop and why. It's fun, full blazing summer. I hope those of you that are in heat domes are staying safe. It's warm here. It's like 100 degrees for the next few days in Portland, Oregon, which is a little unusual in July, but we're enjoying it. We're spending a lot of time in the water with the kids. I'll have more stuff on the Z6 III. I'm working on some night photography tests of lenses and bodies. So lots of cool stuff ahead. Stay tuned, stay safe, stay creative. We'll see you next week.